What's up, college football addicts? Today, we are going to provide you guys an efficient and comprehensive full rundown of the ACC timeline. Again, I'm not an attorney. This is not any kind of legal advice, but I do know that many of you out there are not living and breathing conference realignment like I am on a daily basis. So this video is going to break it down into very bite-sized, digestible pieces for you. Also, we are going to try to be crystal clear about what we know for fact and what we think is likely. A big shout out as well to Regal Knoll over on the On3 FSU site. He does a phenomenal job on that message board. But before we start, I want to take a moment and ask you to hit that subscribe button. We've got more conference realignment news that we expect to be dropping within the month, and I don't want you to miss any of that. So if you live and breathe and die this conference realignment stuff, or just mildly interested like I know some of you are, make sure that you're part of the family at College Football Addiction. In December of 2023, both FSU and the ACC filed competing lawsuits against one another. These lawsuits mostly center around the grant of rights within the conference. So we'll call these the grant of rights lawsuits going forward. The next key date to know with the grant of rights lawsuits is February 16th, 2024, when both FSU and the ACC have agreed to respond to the initial filings. In addition to the grant of rights lawsuits, we're hearing that it is likely that both Clemson and North Carolina will file suit against the ACC at some point here in February. Again, this is likely, but not guaranteed just yet. The next important thing you need to understand is that there are clear terms defined for leaving the ACC. In the ACC bylaws, the buyout is 3 times a team's annual revenue, which is approximately, and you'll see this number figured often, $120 million. In the ACC's grant of rights, there is no buyout defined, but it explicitly defines that a team can leave as long as they leave their broadcast rights with ESPN for the duration of the agreement. So just to review, to leave the ACC, clearly defined, $120 million. And leave your rights with ESPN. The next important thing that you need to understand about the ACC's grant of rights is the rights being granted are only the rights for home games. Multiple sources have confirmed this with me, but I've put links down in the description from The Athletic and Yahoo Sports, which make that abundantly clear. So just to review, the grant of rights only covers a team's home games. So we have 2 very clear things in play here. We have the grant of rights court case, which is determining how much the value of the grant of rights is worth. Entirely separate from that, we have the amount it takes to exit the ACC according to its own defined terms in the contracts. It's very important for you to consider those 2 things entirely separate, as I'm going to explain in just a moment. Right now, most attorneys believe that the ACC is knuckle-dragging the grant of rights lawsuit, and this legal fight could drag on for years. But where this gets interesting is that there is a debate amongst legal scholars whether FSU has to have this grant of rights lawsuit settled prior to announcing that it is leaving the conference. Some lawyers say they do have to have it done. Some say they don't have to have the lawsuit settled before they can announce their departure. Personally, my sources have been consistent on this issue the entire time. The ACC's bylaws and grant of rights clearly defines the terms to leave the ACC. A team can exit and leave the ACC without needing to settle the grant of rights lawsuits. But the question so many lawyers struggle with is how a team would leave without their rights. And again, I'll remind you, as we already discussed prior, rights only apply to a team's home games. So I'm not going to do the math on this video. You can do the math yourself, but I am going to give you the only 4 numbers that you need to understand. So there are 4 important values at play, which I'll show you on a chart right now. There's how much money FSU brings to the Big Ten with their full rights. It's about $140 million. There's how much FSU is worth to the Big Ten with only their away games. Let's call that half, $70 million. There's how much the Big Ten is paying out in 2024. That's $73 million. And then there's how much the ACC is paying out in 2024. That is a very robust $37.9 million. Somewhere between what FSU is worth with only their away games and what the ACC is currently paying, there lies an amount where both FSU and the Big Ten make a lot more money without FSU's home game rights. More money than they would with FSU being in the ACC having their home game rights. To be honest, it's a fairly simple math equation, and this is why we believe it is inevitable. We believe it is almost a certainty that FSU will announce that they are leaving the ACC prior to the deadline in the middle of August. And we believe it is most likely going to be their last year playing in the ACC in 2024. Now, furthermore, we believe that you must consider the grant of rights lawsuits an entirely separate issue from leaving the ACC. There will be negotiated and litigated issues that are completely separate in play here. The exit will be an emergency filing, while the grant of rights lawsuits could go on for a long, long period of time. Now, the last thing that I want you to know is that I have reason to believe that there is a wild card when it comes to whether FSU might leave the ACC even prior to this upcoming 2024 season. Before we talk about that wild card, here are the key dates to know. Again, December, grant of rights lawsuits filed. January, FSU quickly settles their NCAA violations. February 16th of 24 is when both FSU and the ACC have agreed to respond to the initial filings. Sometime in May, the ACC spring meetings and distribution details are finalized. In June, the ACC's fiscal year ends. In June or July, payments are distributed by the ACC, and August 15th is the deadline for FSU to officially announce their exit from the ACC. Now, as you can see from those key dates, sometime at the end of May or June, FSU is supposed to be paid their annual conference revenue by the ACC. I've talked to a couple of different lawyers on this, and I've heard some who believe the ACC will absolutely pay Florida State its 2022-2023 revenue. And I've heard from others who say the ACC claim that FSU breached its contract, and because of that, they absolutely will not pay FSU their 2022-2023 annual revenue. It is my belief that if the ACC withholds revenue from FSU, I think there's a good chance that Florida State will depart the ACC immediately and play in a different conference in 2024. Let me repeat that back, because I know that might be shocking to you, but I'll say it again. If the ACC was to withhold Florida State's revenue in May or June, I believe that FSU will depart the conference prior to the 2024 season. I've heard that emergency contingency plans are already in place in the Big Ten should this happen. And I believe that both sides are taking this threat very seriously. It would be insane for Florida State to leave early. But if they are given no revenue from what they've earned over the last year, I believe that's what they will do. Now, my thought continues to be that the ACC likely will pay Florida State. I don't think that they'll withhold revenue that they've earned for prior years. But if they do, just get ready for the most epic announcement and the fastest changes we've ever seen, because Florida State, I do not believe, will play an ACC schedule in 2024 if that happens to happen. Listen, thank you guys for tuning in. Comprehensive recap of catching you up on where Florida State is in potentially leaving the ACC, what that timeline looks like, some maybe curveballs, monkey wrenches thrown in there. Let me know your thoughts of how you think all of this shakes out and ends. Again, smash the subscribe button. We've got more content on this coming. I appreciate you guys for tuning in to our new channel, College Football Addiction.